The last text my sister ever sent me said, "He's my son. I'm coming to get him tomorrow." No explanation, no warning, just that, and then nothing, not another word. I must have read that message 50 times before I realized my hands were shaking. The clock on the wall said 2:17 a.m., but I didn't sleep after that. I just sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the night through the window, wondering if 10 years could really disappear overnight. Because for a decade, 10 birthdays, 10 Christmases, 10 sets of back-to-school pictures, that boy had called me Mom. But my sister, Lena, she had always called me Temporary. I didn't notice the signs back then. Or maybe I did and didn't want to face them. You know how it is when you build a life out of someone else's mistakes. You start thinking love can rewrite bloodlines. You start thinking if you love hard enough, if you give enough, maybe it'll count for something. When I first took Jamie in, he was barely 3 months old. Lena had left him on my porch in a car seat, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like her perfume, that sugary floral scent she wore even when she was broke. There was a folded note tucked under the strap. It just said, "I can't do this. Please take care of him for a while." For a while. That's how it started. A while. Back then, I thought it meant a few months. Maybe a year. I was 26, working part-time at a diner off Route 8, still paying off student loans from a degree I didn't even finish. I didn't have a plan, but I had a heart big enough to say yes, and that was all that mattered. The first night I had him, I remember sitting on the floor with him asleep against my chest. His breath was soft and fast, like he was dreaming of something better than where he came from. The whole apartment smelled like baby powder and the faint smoke from my neighbor's cigarettes. I remember whispering to him, "You're safe here, okay? I got you." I must have said it 100 times over the years. Every first step, every scraped knee, every fever at 2 a.m. "You're safe here, I got you." But the truth is, I didn't know how fragile that promise really was. Because the law doesn't care how many lullabies you sing. It doesn't care who packed the lunches or who stayed up all night during chicken pox. All it sees is DNA. And that's what Lena came back with, paperwork and blood tests and a voice that said mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what it felt like before the storm, before the knock on the door that split my life in half. There were good years. God, there were beautiful years. Jamie used to wake me up by climbing into bed and whispering, "Mommy, the sun's awake." He'd say it like the sun had been waiting on him to give permission to rise. We used to make pancakes shaped like letters, his name first, then mine. He'd pour syrup on both and say, "Now we're stuck together." And I believed him. When he was 6, he brought home a drawing from school, me holding his hand, with the words, "My mom is my hero." I stuck it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. It stayed there for 10 years. It's still there now, even though the fridge hums in an empty kitchen. See, what they don't tell you about love is that it can blind you to the fine print. Every visit Lena missed, every phone call she ignored, every year she didn't send a single birthday card. I kept making excuses for her. I told myself she was trying to get better, that one day she'd thank me for holding things together until she was ready. But she didn't thank me. She showed up, unannounced, with her hair done and her nails polished, standing on my porch like someone who'd just come home from vacation. Jamie was in the living room, building a Lego tower. He looked up and said, "Mom, there's a lady outside." A lady. He didn't even recognize her. When I opened the door, she smiled like we were still kids, sharing clothes and secrets. She said, "Hey, Mara, I'm back." And just like that, the air shifted. She had papers in her bag, proof that she'd gone to rehab, completed her programs, stabilized her income, filed for custody. It was all so official, so sudden. I tried to keep my voice steady when I asked, "Lena, what are you doing here?" And she said it again, "He's my son." It was like hearing a stranger speak through her. I wanted to remind her who changed his diapers, who stayed up through ear infections, who went to parent-teacher meetings and sat through school plays and taught him how to ride a bike without falling. But none of that mattered. Not to her, not to the system. That night I didn't sleep. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet tick of that same clock that's been in my kitchen for a decade. Every sound felt sharper. The world felt smaller. And when morning came, she came too, with a car seat and a social worker. Jamie's backpack was still on the couch. His sneakers were by the door. I remember kneeling to tie them one last time, my fingers trembling over the laces. He looked confused, scared even. He said, "Mom, where are we going?" And I couldn't answer. I just smiled a weak, shaking smile and said, "It's okay, baby. You'll be fine." Then Lena took his hand, and they left. I stood there in the doorway until their car disappeared down the road. The sun was too bright, too cruel. Everything smelled like summer. Cut grass, warm pavement, and the faint sweetness of the lemonade we never finished. The house felt hollow after that. Every sound echoed, his laughter, his footsteps, his voice calling my name. Even now, sometimes when the wind hits the screen door just right, I swear I hear him say, "Mom, the sun's awake." And I still whisper back, "I know, baby. I know." The day after they left, I caught myself setting 2 plates on the table. One for me, one for him. It was muscle memory, the kind that doesn't check if the heart's still in it. The plate stayed there all day, untouched, like a ghost of habit. By evening, I couldn't stand looking at it anymore, so I shoved it in the sink and watched it crack against the edge. The sound was sharp, final. I used to think heartbreak came like a storm, loud, chaotic, impossible to ignore. But it doesn't. It seeps. It moves through your house, through your skin, slow and quiet, until everything feels heavy. That first week was a blur of half-slept nights and rooms that smelled like him. His laundry basket was still full. His toothbrush was still on the sink. There were little fingerprints on the hallway wall I couldn't bring myself to wipe away. I'd walk past his room and feel my chest tighten like someone was wringing it from the inside. People tried to help in the way people do. They'd say things like, "You did the right thing, Mara." Or, "At least he's with his mother now." I'd nod, smile, pretend to agree, and then go home and scream into a towel so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Because no one prepares you for this kind of loss. There's no name for it. You're not a widow, not an orphan, not divorced. You're just erased. He was my whole life. My routine. My reason. Every morning started with him. Every decision was filtered through him. And now I woke up to nothing but the sound of a house breathing, the creak of the floors, the hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of the streetlight through my window. It's terrifying how quickly you can go from someone's everything to no one at all. I tried to keep busy. I told myself, just keep moving, Mara. That's what people say when they don't know what else to do. So I scrubbed floors that weren't dirty, rearranged furniture, cleaned closets I hadn't opened in years. But grief doesn't care how clean your house is. It sits in the corners and waits. The first Saturday without him, I drove to the park, the one where he used to ride his bike in crooked circles until his cheeks turned red. I parked the car across the street and just sat there, watched other people's kids laugh, fall, cry, run. I could almost hear his voice in the noise, that breathless giggle he had when he tried to go faster than his legs would allow. A woman with a stroller caught me staring and smiled, politely like strangers do. And for a second, I wanted to roll down the window and say, that used to be me. I used to belong here too. But I didn't. I just turned the key and drove home. I started writing letters to him after that. Not to send, just to survive. They weren't neat or poetic. They were messy, tear-stained, full of words I didn't even know I still had in me. Dear Jamie, did you sleep okay last night? Do you still hum when you brush your teeth? Your room is just how you left it. I can't move your things yet. I know it's silly, but the stuffed bear you used to sleep with, he's still sitting on your pillow waiting. I filled an entire notebook like that. Maybe 2, maybe more. I lost count. Sometimes I'd walk past a store window and see my reflection. Same face, same clothes, but the woman staring back looked empty, like she'd been hollowed out. Lena called once, about a month after she took him. Her voice was cheerful, like we were catching up over coffee. She said Jamie was adjusting well, that he'd started at a new school, that they were bonding. I tried to sound happy for her. I did. I even said, "That's great, I'm glad he's doing okay." But after I hung up, I dropped the phone on the floor and sobbed until my throat burned. Because I realized something awful that day. I'd raised him to love me like a mother, but I'd also raised him to forgive her like a son. And he did. God, that wrecked me. Some nights, I'd find myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, zooming in on his smile, the way his hair stuck up at the crown, that tiny freckle near his ear. It was like trying to memorize someone I might never see again. People love to talk about closure, how it's something you can achieve if you accept and move on. But closure is a myth. There's no ceremony for a loss like this. No funeral to mark the end. Just an open wound that keeps learning how to scab. Around the 3rd month, I started having dreams, the kind that feel too real to shake. In one, I was standing at the edge of a field calling his name, and he was running toward me. I could see him, the same blue hoodie, the same dimple on his left cheek. But every time I reached out, he'd blur, fade, like static on an old TV. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for someone who wasn't there. I remember one morning, I found myself in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, staring at the same brand he used to love, the one with the cartoon bear on the box. My hand reached for it before my brain caught up. And right there, between the shelves and the humming refrigerators, I just broke. Because there's no dignity in grief. It shows up anywhere in aisles, in songs, in the smell of laundry detergent that reminds you of a person who's gone. A friend of mine, Nora, came over one evening. She's known me since high school, the kind of friend who doesn't ask for explanations, just shows up with Chinese takeout and sits beside you. We didn't talk much that night. She ate. I picked at my food. At some point, she said, "You should talk to someone, Mara. A therapist. This isn't something you just walk off." And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. How do you explain to a stranger that you're grieving a child who isn't dead? But eventually I did go. It took me 3 weeks to make the appointment, and another 2 to actually show up. Her name was Dr. Patel. Calm eyes, soft voice, the kind of person who makes silence feel safe again. She asked me to start from the beginning. And for the first time I said everything out loud. Every ugly detail, every fear, every mistake I'd made in trying to play savior. Halfway through, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Dr. Patel said something that stuck with me. She said, "You built your whole identity around being needed. But now, you need to learn who you are when no one depends on you." That sentence rattled around my head for weeks. Who am I when no one depends on me? I didn't know, but I started finding out. At first, it was small things. Cooking for one without crying. Opening his door and letting the air circulate again. Walking past the playground without flinching. Then one day, I sat on that same couch, the one where I used to rock him to sleep, and I realized the silence didn't hurt as much. It was still there, but softer, like it had learned to live beside me instead of inside me. I started taking long walks after work. No destination, no reason, just movement. I'd pass houses with bikes in the yard, hear the faint sounds of cartoons through open windows, and instead of breaking me, it made me grateful. Grateful that somewhere out there, a boy I loved more than anything was still laughing, still growing, still safe. I think that's the thing about love, real love. It doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It becomes something quieter, steadier, like a candle you keep burning in another room. Lena texted me again, maybe 6 months later. Just a photo, Jamie holding a baseball trophy, missing one front tooth. Underneath it said, "He asked me to send this to you." I stared at that picture for a long time. My first instinct was to cry, and I did. But then something else happened. I smiled, because for the first time, the ache didn't feel like punishment. It felt like proof. Proof that what I gave him mattered, even if I never get to claim it. I printed that photo and put it on my nightstand. Not to torture myself. To remember. Because memory, I've learned, is the only kind of parenthood that can't be taken away. There's a little coffee shop 2 blocks from my house, small, quiet, always smells like cinnamon and steamed milk. I started going there about a year after Jamie left. At first, I'd just sit in the corner with my notebook pretending to write, but really just watching life happen around me. People laughing, friends meeting, mothers balancing strollers with one hand and coffee cups with the other. It hurt, it did, but it also reminded me that the world was still turning. That even when your story stops, someone else's keeps going. I started to realize something in that coffee shop. I'd spent so many years being his mother that I'd forgotten how to just be Mara. I didn't even know what I liked anymore. What kind of music, what kind of food, what kind of life I wanted if it wasn't orbiting someone else's needs. So I began small, tiny, almost invisible things. I took a pottery class at the community center, bought a secondhand bike and started riding through the park at sunset. Volunteered at the library on weekends. At first, I felt guilty, like I was cheating on the life I used to have. But slowly, the guilt softened into something else. Permission, maybe. Permission to exist beyond the role I once played. One afternoon, during pottery class, the instructor, a woman named Eileen with paint on her shoes and the kindest laugh, asked us to make something that represented home. Everyone made little houses or bowls. I made a pair of hands cupped together. When she asked me why, I said, because home isn't a place to me anymore. It's whoever I'm holding, even if it's just myself. She smiled. I didn't realize it then, but that was the first time I'd spoken about my story without breaking. I still have those clay hands. They sit on the windowsill in my kitchen, right next to Jamie's school photo. Sometimes I put flowers in them, sometimes keys, sometimes nothing at all, but they're always there waiting. It's funny, I used to think strength looked like holding everything together. Now I think it looks more like knowing what to let go of. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop trying to rewrite the past in your head. It means you stop punishing yourself for not being enough to change someone else's choices. It took me years to learn that lesson. About 2 summers ago, I ran into Lena at the farmer's market. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was longer, her face calmer. She looked settled. Jamie wasn't with her, but I didn't ask. We stood there for a moment, awkward and polite, surrounded by the smell of peaches and basil. She said, "You look good, Mara." And I said, "You too." She hesitated, then added, "He talks about you all the time, you know. He keeps that stuffed bear on his bed." That one sentence, it undid me, but in the gentlest way, like a knot finally loosening. I nodded, smiled, felt my throat tighten, and said, "Tell him I love him, okay?" She said she would, and that was it. No dramatic hug, no tears, just 2 women who had both been broken in different ways, standing in the middle of a Saturday market, learning how to exist in the same air again. After she walked away, I bought a basket of peaches. They were warm from the sun, soft to the touch, sweet enough to make my eyes water. I remember thinking, this is what healing tastes like. Not fireworks, not a grand finale, just something gentle, ordinary, alive. Sometimes people ask me now if I'd ever take him back, if he ever wanted to come. And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I've stopped waiting for that day to be the thing that saves me. Because it turns out you can rebuild without getting back what you lost. You just start where you are with what's left and you build slow. I still talk to him sometimes, not out loud, but in those quiet moments before bed when the house settles and the world goes still. I'll whisper things like, "I hope you're sleeping okay," or "I'm proud of you." It's not about being hurt anymore. It's about keeping the love alive in some form. Last winter, I sent him a letter, not a long one, just a few pages. I didn't even know if it would reach him, but I sent it anyway. I told him I was doing okay, that I'd started writing again, that the world had gotten a little softer around the edges. 2 weeks later, I got a reply. His handwriting, messy, tilted, still learning to fit into the lines. He wrote, "Dear Aunt Mara, I miss you sometimes. Mom says maybe we can visit next summer. I got taller. I made the baseball team again. I think you'd be proud. Love, Jamie. I read that letter 100 times. Still do. Not because it healed me, but because it reminded me that what we shared didn't vanish. It just moved. There's this quote I once heard: "Love is what remains when everything else is gone." I didn't understand it back then. I do now, because love remained. It's in the letters. It's in the clay hands on the window. It's in the way I still make pancakes on Sunday mornings, just for me, but always in the shape of a heart. Some mornings I wake up, open the curtains, and let the light pour in. The air smells like coffee and hope. And sometimes, just for a second, I hear that small, familiar voice, "Mom, the sun's awake." And I smile, because so am I.